Brock Lesnar is one of the most accomplished wrestlers in history, but what if we just erased him from it entirely? With the allegations that came out about 2 months ago, I think it's the perfect time to answer this question. What if Brock Lesnar was truly erased from history? In March of 2002, Brock Lesnar would make his debut, taking the WWE by storm and being dubbed the next big thing. And with Paul Heyman as his agent, he would go on to fight instant success. Except in this hypothetical timeline, Brock Lesnar would never make his debut, and Paul Heyman would also not return to the WWE, at least yet. Without Brock Lesnar, his many feuds with the Hardys and other wrestlers just wouldn't occur. They'd probably just be fighting like, I don't know, Stevie Richards on Heat or something. The first major win of Brock Lesnar's career would happen at the 2002 King of the Ring. Brock Lesnar would win the King of the Ring and go on to SummerSlam. However, with Brock being gone, a huge change occurs. Stone Cold Steve Austin would not end up leaving due to creative differences, and Stone Cold would not only be in the King of the Ring, but he would win the entire tournament and would go on to SummerSlam challenging a Rock in another classic. Rock vs. Austin 3 would be an incredible match despite Austin's declining health at the time. Stone Cold would end up beating The Rock due to Rock's aspirations outside of wrestling, so Stone Cold would be the undisputed champion while Rock goes off to Hollywood for a while. In this timeline, Stone Cold would end up going to SmackDown, taking the WWE title to the brand and becoming the top guy of the show. He'd go on to holding the championship throughout the fall, defeating The Undertaker at Unforgiven and No Mercy, and would end up also beating the returning Big Show at Survivor Series 2002. Undertaker would take a sabbatical until 2003, and the Big Show would end up in the mid-card, being left off of Armageddon 2002. Stone Cold would go on to defend the Undisputed Championship against Kurt Angle at Armageddon. During the match, Stone Cold looks like he's going to hit the stunner on a Kurt, but he hits the ref instead and the ref goes down. Eric Bischoff comes out and attacks Stone Cold, costing him the championship. Kurt Angle wins the WWE title and Stone Cold takes a break due to his nagging. Bischoff brags about getting rid of Stone Cold Steve Austin and getting revenge for taking the WWE title to SmackDown. Back to the 2003 Royal Rumble. Kurt Angle would defend the WWE title against Chris Benoit in an absolute classic match. Triple H and Scott Steiner wrestle a complete disaster of a match. And the Royal Rumble match itself. Now, rather than Brock Lesnar winning the Royal Rumble at number 30, instead a returning Undertaker wins the Royal Rumble by finally eliminating his brother Kane after the two brothers fight as the final two in the Rumble match. Instead of what we got at WrestleMania, we would instead get Kurt Angle versus The Undertaker in the main event of WrestleMania 19. Best wrestler in the world versus the streak of The Undertaker. The match writes itself, really. At WrestleMania 19, with The Undertaker in the main event, A-Train and Big Show would be added to the WWE Tag Title match, and Nathan Jones would end up not wrestling and wouldn't be on the show, even though he wasn't in the first place. The Undertaker would get out of Kurt Angle's ankle lock and hit a tombstone piledriver to pin Kurt Angle, and The Undertaker wins the WWE Championship once again at WrestleMania, keeping his streak intact. The Undertaker would go on to hold the championship post-Mania and throughout the summer, besting Big Show at Backlash, John Cena at Vengeance, and would fight Kurt Angle at SummerSlam 2003, in which Kurt Angle would win back the WWE title. Kurt Angle winning the championship would have him enter a program with The Undertaker that goes throughout No Mercy, where Kurt Angle would fight Taker in a biker chain match. Kurt would end up retaining his championship due to Vince McMahon's interference. Taker would go to fight Vince in the Buried Alive match, where Angle would defend the WWE Championship against Chris Benoit and John Cena in a triple threat match, canceling the Survivor Series match between Team Angle and Team Lesnar. Angle would retain the WWE Championship and would go into the new year defending at the Royal Rumble against Bob Holly. He retained and would again defend the WWE Championship at No Way Out, but would fight Eddie Guerrero, and Eddie would shock Angle by ending his title reign, hitting a frog splash, pinning him for the win, and Eddie Guerrero would still win the WWE Championship in this timeline. He still does. After No Way Out, Kurt wants his rematch due to winning unfairly, according to Kurt at least, and the two would go on to fight WrestleMania 20 to fight for the WWE Championship. Everything in this hypothetical actually matches with our real timeline, except one match. Goldberg would still need an opponent for WrestleMania 20. Rather than Goldberg being in an actual feud, he ended up being in a squash match against someone, I don't know, Stevie Richards, and would win. This would avoid the embarrassment that was Lesnar versus Goldberg, and after WrestleMania 20, everything in this hypothetical timeline will go according to our real one, from Post-Mania 20 all the way through WrestleMania 28 in 2012, so it's time for a massive time skip. After WrestleMania 28, Brock Lesnar will return to the WWE and fight John Cena at Extreme Rules. He ends up losing because that's a smart booking decision. Good job, Vince. But with Brock being erased in our hypothetical timeline, instead of Brock coming out and attacking Cena, no one comes out, and John Cena takes a month off to recover from his depression of losing to The Rock. Cena would then move on to feuding with People Power, Johnny Ace, and The Big Show. Riveting television, I know. And honestly, Cena should just go back into hiding, because really, Johnny Ace, that's the best you got, Vince? A big change that does occur is at SummerSlam. Rather than Brock having a match with Triple H doesn't compete at SummerSlam at all, and wouldn't return until the next year's SummerSlam, as Triple H becomes more a part of the corporate side of things, and after 28, it feels like he's done everything until his Bryan feud. Now you could say, what about WrestleMania 29? I looked up and down the roster to see who could fight Triple H, but there is no one. CM Punk is busy, John Cena is busy, Taker is busy, so I just think that he wouldn't wrestle anybody. Who's gonna wrestle? He's gonna wrestle, like, I don't know, David Otunga? No. Triple H doesn't have anybody to fight, so just in this timeline, there's just nothing for him to do, unfortunately. At SummerSlam 2013, instead of CM Punk fighting Brock Lesnar, CM Punk would fight a young and up-and-coming Dean Ambrose in the opening match of the show. CM Punk puts up a fight, but the Shield's interference costs Punk the United States Championship, and Dean Ambrose will retain his United States Championship. This sets up a feud between CM Punk and the Shield earlier than in our actual timeline, where at the 2014 Royal Rumble, Brock Lesnar fought The Big Show. Obviously, this wouldn't happen in our real timeline, and Big Show would just end up being in the Royal Rumble because there's not much for him to do. The only thing he did in our actual timeline was just job out to Lesnar in 5 minutes. So he'd just be in the Rumble and get eliminated like everybody else. Another stark change would be WrestleMania 30, where in our timeline, Undertaker fought Brock Lesnar. We all know what happened in that match. The streak ended. Brock Lesnar killed the Undertaker's streak. However, in this alternate timeline, Undertaker would end up fighting someone like Sheamus, as Sheamus wants to do something big and also get back in the spotlight, and what better way than trying to end the streak of The Undertaker. Undertaker would defeat Sheamus, extending his streak to 22-0, meaning that because of Brock Lesnar's absence, Undertaker's streak stays alive for now. Daniel Bryan would win the WWE Championship at WrestleMania and would defeat Kane in Extreme Rules. Unfortunately, Bryan would still have to relinquish the championship, and John Cena would end up winning the WWE title at Money in the Bank. Rather than Cena being squashed by Lesnar at the SummerSlam 2014 event, John Cena would instead continue to be the champion, as they have no one to take the title off him. 2015 begins, and it's about Roman Reigns, who would be propped up by WWE as the next babyface of the company. And what better way to do that than by winning the Royal Rumble? Roman Reigns would still win the Royal Rumble in our timeline regardless, because they were always going to push Roman Reigns. Doesn't matter if Brock Lesnar's gone or not. Roman Reigns was going to be a main eventer, whether you like it or not. So Roman Reigns, unfortunately, wins the Royal Rumble 2015 and still gets the horrible reaction, getting The Rock booed in 2015. And in our actual timeline, Brock Lesnar would retain the championship at the Royal Rumble against Seth Rollins and John Cena. But with Brock gone, John Cena would once again retain the championship by defeating Seth Rollins, who's the Money in the Bank briefcase holder. Why he just got a free title shot, I don't know. The story writes itself, really. The current face of WWE, John Cena, and the new upcoming babyface, Roman Reigns. Going into WrestleMania, we still get a mediocre feud between John Cena and Roman Reigns, and we still get the horrible tug of war to end the build of Raw. At WrestleMania 31, the card is shuffled around a bit. With John Cena in the main event, Rusev instead fights Daniel Bryan for the US Championship instead, which Bryan defeats Rusev and becomes the new US Champion. Dean Ambrose ends up winning the Intercontinental Championship ladder match, and the biggest moment is in Bray Wyatt versus The Undertaker. Rather than Taker winning and extending his streak, Bray Wyatt ends The Undertaker's undefeated streak, meaning WWE creates its next top star in Bray, kind of takes the role as being the next monster in the company. In the main event, John Cena defends the WWE World Heavyweight Championship against Roman Reigns. The match plays out like the one in our timeline. Not really the, destruction of Roman Reigns by Lesnar, but more of a back and forth fight. It's still a really good match. But In the end, Seth Rollins still runs out, cashes in his briefcase, curb stomps Roman Reigns, and wins the WWE Championship in the main event. The heist of the century still happens, regardless of whether Lesnar is involved or not. With Bray ending the streak, he becomes the next big star in the company, squashing people on pay-per-views left, right, and center, while Rollins holds the title throughout the summer until Battleground, where Bray Wyatt steps up to the plate to provide an ultimate challenge to Seth Rollins. Wyatt in the match completely obliterates Rollins and is about to win the WWE Championship, but then the lights go out and The Undertaker is back, costing Wyatt the championship and would enter into a feud with him that goes from SummerSlam to Hell in a Cell. So Bray Wyatt and The Undertaker would restart their feud. The new face of fear versus the old face of fear. These two would fight at SummerSlam and it would go straight through Hell in a Cell, which Wyatt would win the feud in the end and would end up reforming the Wyatt family at Hell in a Cell. As for Roman Reigns, he ends up fighting Dean Ambrose through SummerSlam and finally Hell in a Cell, as Roman Reigns in our timeline feuds with Bray Wyatt, so Dean Ambrose takes Bray Wyatt's spot in this world. At the beginning of 2016, Roman Reigns is going into the Rumble while feuding with The Authority and defending the WWE Championship inside of that Rumble. Brock would have been replaced by Alex Riley. Yeah, sure. You could really plug in anyone here, to be honest. It doesn't really matter. I just chose Riley because it's funny. At WrestleMania, Brock Lesnar would end up fighting Dean Ambrose, and both the match and the pay-per-view in general were doo-doo ass. This match would have been changed to Bray Wyatt versus Dean Ambrose, and I'm going to be honest, this match would have not been very good, which just goes to show you WrestleMania 32 was one of the worst ever. At SummerSlam 2016, Randy Orton would fight Brock Lesnar and would be left in a pool of his own blood. But in this timeline, Randy would have fought Bray Wyatt instead of Lesnar, and he wouldn't leave Randy in a pool of blood. But this would kickstart the Orton-Wyatt feud storyline sometime earlier, but not much would change about the feud itself. Also, Brock Lesnar wouldn't be on the cover of WWE 2K17. Instead, it would have been our boy Bray Wyatt. At the Survivor Series 2016, Brock Lesnar was squashed by Bill Goldberg in one of the worst booking decisions ever, in my opinion. But in this timeline without Brock Lesnar, Goldberg would still return at the Survivor Series, but instead of fighting Brock Lesnar, he would have fought the newly non-Wyatt family member Braun Strowman, who would squash jobbers left and right. Controversially, Goldberg would squash Braun Strowman, who at this point never fought anyone like Goldberg before. Goldberg would somehow, in some ungodly way, hit a jackhammer onto Braun Strowman and beat him in a minute. Don't question how this would happen, just believe me. Goldberg gets his big hoorah, and this would kickstart a feud between Goldberg and Strowman. On Raw the next night, Strowman would obliterate Goldberg and send him back home in Georgia until the next year. At the 2017 Royal Rumble, Goldberg would make his grand return to the WWE and eliminates Braun Strowman to get revenge for his beatdown a couple months earlier. Then Goldberg would go on to Fastlane to defeat Kevin Owens and win the Universal Championship, and would defend the championship at WrestleMania 33. In our actual timeline, it would be against Brock Lesnar, but in this timeline, it would be the blow-off between Braun Strowman and Bill Goldberg. Braun Strowman would finally defeat Goldberg in a one-on-one situation, winning the Universal Championship and being coronated of sorts as the next big monster. In our real timeline, Brock Lesnar would hold the Universal title for an agonizing 504 days. Instead, in this hypothetical without Lesnar, Braun Strowman would be champion until Great Balls of Fire, where Samoa Joe would win the Universal Championship from Braun Strowman after choking him out. We fast forward to the 2017 SummerSlam. Samoa Joe is the current Universal Champion, and he will defend against Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman in a triple threat main event. Samoa Joe would end up making Roman Reigns pass out to the Coquina Clutch, and Samoa Joe would continue throughout the rest of the year as the Universal Champion. He would defeat Braun Strowman at No Mercy. He would team up with The Shield at TLC because Roman got sick. He would defeat AJ Styles, the current WWE Champion, at Survivor Series, and would reign as champion to close out the year. Pretty good year for Samoa Joe, to be honest. And now we go to the 2018 Royal Rumble, where Samoa Joe would defend the Universal Championship against Bray Wyatt, who has earned a title shot after defeating Roman Reigns. Bray Wyatt would win back the Universal Championship and would go into WrestleMania as the champion, as he would defend the Universal Championship against Roman Reigns, who would win the Elimination Chamber to earn this shot. So, at WrestleMania 34, Bray Wyatt will defend the Universal title against Roman Reigns, and in the end, Bray Wyatt ends up besting Roman Reigns cleanly. This would be my dream scenario. Bray Wyatt closing a WrestleMania as champion is something I would have booked years ago. But this would not be the end of their feud. Bray would continue to hold the title while Roman would continue chasing Bray, which would lead to one more match at the 2018 SummerSlam, where Bray and Roman would collide one more time, with Roman Reigns defeating Bray Wyatt and finally winning the big one. He finally wins the Universal Championship. After this, Bray Wyatt would take a sabbatical from the WWE, and Roman would go on to be the champion of Raw. Until Roman's leukemia came back and he would have to vacate the championship. While most things act normally, Roman's departure leads to a shakeup in the main event scene. This would lead to Goldberg coming back for a Saudi payday, and Braun Strowman would resurge into the main event scene, defeating Goldberg in a quick match. Braun Strowman would lead Raw for the rest of the year, losing to Daniel Bryan at Survivor Series in a sleeper great match. At the 2019 Royal Rumble, Seth Rollins would win the men's Royal Rumble match and go on to fight Braun Strowman at WrestleMania 35 for the Universal Championship. In the opening match, Seth Rollins hits a few curb stomps onto Braun Strowman and gets an upset win opening the show. Seth Rollins would go on to have a mediocre title reign that doesn't change regardless of whether Lesnar exists or not. It doesn't. Seth Rollins was always going to be champion. Don't debate me on that. Anyways, the Money in the Bank ladder match happens, and instead of this stupid catastrophe where Brock Lesnar wins the briefcase, we get something better. Mustafa Ali would win the Money in the Bank briefcase and becomes Mr. Money in the Bank. This leads to Mustafa Ali deciding to cash in his briefcase, but instead of doing it the heelish way, he does it the dumb babyface way by cashing in for a main event title match at SummerSlam. So, Seth Rollins would defend the Universal Championship against Mustafa Ali at SummerSlam. This match would have slapped hard and would have made Ali into a main event caliber superstar. Still, Seth retains the championship, but Ali, after putting on an incredible match, still looks good, and now WWE has a new star in Mustafa Ali. Rollins would then go into a feud with the recently returned Bray Wyatt, who is now known as The Fiend. Another big change is Kofi Kingston's title reign. As we all know, Kofi Kingston won the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 35, and it ended in catastrophe. Brock Lesnar beats him in 10 seconds and everyone's losing their minds. Instead, Kofi would continue on being the WWE Championship and would go to Monday Night Raw due to Bray Wyatt being sent to SmackDown. So Kofi would go to Raw as the WWE Champion while Bray goes to SmackDown as the Universal Champion. So the champions are swapped, whoop-de-doo. Kofi would defend against Rey Mysterio as Rey wants to win back the WWE title for the first time in 8 years after his first failed catastrophic run in 2011. Rey Mysterio would defeat Kofi Kingston, ending his impressive championship reign, and would fight Kofi Kingston at TLC in a ladder match. Rey would retain the championship once again, ending the mini feud. At the 2020 Royal Rumble, Brock Lesnar as the WWE Champion would enter the Royal Rumble at number 1 to prove he's the best and how strong he is. But in our hypothetical timeline, without him, this never happens. Instead, Rey Mysterio, the WWE Champion, will defend against Samoa Joe, who's back after, I don't know, fucking around in the mid-card with the Revival. Who knows? Maybe they were doing Uzi hot. Samoa Joe would end up defeating Rey Mysterio after hitting a muscle buster and pinning Rey. Samoa Joe would become the new WWE Champion. Now has won both the Universal and the WWE title in this timeline, making him way more successful than he ever was in real life. Joe would stay champion to fight Drew McIntyre, the 2020 Royal Rumble winner at WrestleMania 36. Despite Brock Lesnar not existing, the COVID-19 pandemic would still happen, and it would be in the same timeline it happened before, shutting down everything across the world, and wrestling would get hit hard. Still, WWE somehow put on WrestleMania 36 in the PC, where Samoa Joe would defend the title against Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre would defeat Samoa Joe, becoming the WWE Champion, and soon after, Samoa Joe would transition into a commentator, while the hypothetical timeline would be the same as the real timeline, unfortunately. This was never going to work for Joe. He was never supposed to be the guy. He was supposed to be a guy. So, Drew would be champion, and Roman returns at SummerSlam to become the tribal chief, yada yada yada. After his loss, Brock leaves the WWE and is gone for the remainder of 2020 and first half of 2021. In this timeline, Brock Lesnar never shows up at the end of SummerSlam 2021, and the show ends with Roman celebrating after defeating John Cena. Roman Reigns continues to be champion throughout the rest of 2021, And at the beginning of 2022, WWE had an event called Day 1. This was originally supposed to be Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship, but the match was cancelled due to Roman getting COVID. So Brock would be put in the WWE title match and would end Big E's championship reign and would lead to a unification match at WrestleMania 38. But in the alternate timeline where Roman gets COVID still and the Universal Championship match is called off entirely, Drew McIntyre would be put in this match and would get put in a handicap match against Madcap and Corbin because Roman got sick. The big change here is that Big E retains his championship in the Fatal 4-Way main event, and Big E would hold the championship throughout WrestleMania. Instead of Brock winning the Royal Rumble, God, Jesus, it would end up being Drew McIntyre, who would get his second Royal Rumble win and would go get his WrestleMania main event in front of a crowd against the Universal Champion Roman Reigns, while Big E would defend his championship against Bobby Lashley. Roman Reigns would retain the Universal Championship, while Bobby Lashley would end up winning the WWE title from Big E. These two outcomes would have massive stakes in the coming months. In our timeline, Brock would return at SummerSlam to fight Roman Reigns in a rematch to blow off their 7-year feud. However, in the alternate timeline where Roman Reigns and Bobby Lashley would collide in a title-for-title unification match at the 2022 SummerSlam. This would be a mega match, and both men would be built like gods going into this event. But just like always, Roman Reigns would end up defeating Lashley due to bloodline interference, and Roman Reigns would become the undisputed WWE Universal Champion. Reigns would end up leaving to go on a hiatus, while Bobby Lashley would be lost, until Extreme Rules 2022, where a certain Eater of Worlds would make his return to the company. But first, let's back up. Bray Wyatt would be released in August of 2021, shocking the wrestling world. Like, what the fuck? We released Bray Wyatt? He would return over a year later at Extreme Rules in October. Rather than Bray not wrestling for the rest of the year, he would be put in a feud with Bobby Lashley, and at Crown Jewel, Bray Wyatt would make his in-ring return. I know, Saudi. Bad memories. Bray would defeat Lashley, and him and Uncle Howdy would put Lashley on the shelf for a few months. And Bray would move on to his next victim in LA Knight. And at Elimination Chamber, Bray would cut a promo about he and Uncle Howdy have been dominating, and how at WrestleMania they plan on revealing their new family. But Bobby Lashley returns and spears Wyatt and escapes before Howdy saves Wyatt. This would set up their massive rematch between Wyatt and Lashley at WrestleMania 35. But this match never happens, as Bray Wyatt gets sick and is pulled from the event, while Bobby Lashley is left without an opponent. At WrestleMania 39, Brock fights Omos, but with Wyatt gone and Brock erased, Lashley ends up fighting Omos and beats him in the opener. After WrestleMania 39, Cody Rhodes would come out after losing to fight Roman Reigns in a tag match, and Brock would end up teaming up with Rhodes against Solo and Reigns, and Brock turns on him immediately, and they have a feud that goes from Backlash to SummerSlam, where Cody goes over Lesnar. In this timeline, Bobby Lashley takes the place of Lesnar and obliterates Cody on Raw. Bobby Lashley faces off against Cody Rhodes at Backlash. Cody then fights Bobby Lashley again at Night of Champions. Lashley makes Cody pass out to the Hurt Lock, and Lashley decides to pulverize Cody even more after the match. Lashley gets suspended by the WWE and is sent home until Money in the Bank, where after Cody beats Dominic Mysterio, Lashley returns and beats up Cody again. This leads to a blow-off match between Lashley and Rhodes at SummerSlam, where Cody defeats Lashley and Cody gets the rub from Bobby Lashley. Cool. This would be Brock Lesnar's last match of pro wrestling, as he was supposed to return at the 2024 Royal Rumble and fight Gunther at WrestleMania 40, but was pulled due to the Janelle Grant accusations against Vince McMahon, the WWE, and Brock Lesnar. Many things would have changed, but one thing stayed the same. The show must go on, and that's the mantra of pro wrestling. While this is probably the end of Brock Lesnar in wrestling, I'm sorry, Brock fans, it's just the truth. The one thing I've learned over watching wrestling for so long is one thing and one thing only. Never say never.